What's up everyone, this is Tranquil Toys, and today I'm taking a look at the new Star Wars Black Series Magnaguard figure. And I do have two of these. As you can see, you gotta have two, one on each side of General Grievous. So this figure is surprisingly good, especially when compared to some of the other Black Series figures, or at least the majority of Star Wars Black Series figures. I think a lot of the figures are just not good enough, especially when compared to some other companies that are putting out figures now. But every now and then they do surprise me with how well they engineer a figure, and this is one of those figures that really surprised me, and I didn't expect this figure to be able to move as good as it does, or to look as good as it does in different poses and pictures and stuff like that. So I've really been enjoying this figure. So I'll go ahead, take a closer look, and give you my thoughts. The overall presentation of the figure is pretty nice. I mean, it's not accurate to how the Magnaguard appears in the movies, or even in the animated series, the Clone Wars animated series. But besides that, it's a good representation of the character and of the design. For this price range, it's not feasible for it to look accurate. I do like the way the figure looks. Even just standing there, it looks really cool. And then the cape is also pretty nice. It's not wired or anything like that. It is a little thin, but there is two layers to it. Obviously a wired cape that's thicker is going to make this figure look a lot better. But for what this is, and the fact that they included it with the figure and it's not plastic, I really do appreciate that from Hasbro, so that's pretty cool. The accessories are also pretty nicely done as well. It does come with two different staffs. So this one right here, I thought this staff was the one that had the electrical abilities, but apparently it's this one. I was looking at some photos from the movie, and I guess it's this one. So I'm not sure where this one appears, but I know I've seen it in the movie somewhere. I think the staff might just be for looks, and this might be the one that actually shocks people. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments. But I like the inclusion of both, and the effects, which are pretty nicely done. I would have liked for them to have been bigger because they don't really fit that well on the staff. I'll get into that later. And just the way the figure looks from the head to the bottom of the figure, just really nicely done. The sculpt is nice. Maybe a wash would make some of the detail come out better, but I appreciate the amount of detail that they put into the figure. So for example, to have some weathering on the arm and the legs, and also on the chest here. Also the red that they used could have been a little bit brighter maybe, but I do like the way that it stands out against the white. Also the cape has brown markings on it, or a brown design. And then one thing that you might notice is that he has shoulder pads, but they're off right now, and that's because they fall off a lot. If you're moving the figure around, it's going to fall apart. So that's really unfortunate the way they engineered that. They could have done that a lot better, but they chose to engineer it that way, and so that does cause problems. So that's why I have them off right now. And on this figure, I just have the left one on. So one area where this figure surprised me is the articulation. So you actually get a lot more articulation than you would expect from a sculpt like this. So the head articulation is not really the greatest, but you do get some amount of range going back and forward, and then you can move all around. And just so you know, I'm going to start doing reviews a little bit differently. I'm going to spend less time on articulation, like going through all the detail of the articulation. I'm just going to sort of move it around and show you what you can do, and point out special things that stand out to me, and just things that I want to mention. The shoulders are pretty interesting. They kind of remind me of some import figures, but it is a ball peg in there, so you can rotate it all around on that ball joint, which gives it a little bit of extra motion. Not really like a butterfly joint, but it does have the same effect. So you can move his arms across his chest, which is really nice, and then move his arms really far back, and just all around. The torso articulation could be a little bit better, and then it does pop out, not too easily, but it does pop out if you're sort of forcing the articulation. So you got to be careful of that. Yeah, the torso articulation not the greatest. Leg articulation is also not the greatest, but because he's a robot, he can do some sort of inhumane poses. So I actually do like the way that they did the legs here. No going outward because it's not a ball joint, just well, it is a ball joint, but the sculpt doesn't allow it to move out. But like I mentioned, you can get really good crouching poses and things like that, so that's really awesome. Ankles are ratcheted, or staged as they're called. So again, that's pretty unfortunate because you can't do nuanced poses. And another thing like that is it really hinders the ability to stand the figure. That's why I'm using a McFarlane stand. It's probably the most versatile, best stand on the action figure market today. So it does take a few tries to get him to stand, and then he's not very sturdy once he's standing. You can get really good poses. So really like how this figure turned out. So the thing about the electrical effects is that they're not very secure on there. They're just kind of held there by friction, so they're really likely to fall. And I'm not sure, I guess it's supposed to go on this way, and that just makes the figure even cooler, and it also adds a third point for the figure to balance on. So if you put the staff touching the ground, that could also help balancing him and doing poses, so he looks really cool. So overall, very positive about this figure. Just a few negatives like the shoulder pads and the ankles and some of the articulation here and there, but for the most part it's really cool looking figure. Really cool to pose him around and play with him. Another thing you can do is you can actually remove his sort of head wrap, and I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like with his head wrap and his cape off. So I took it off, and you can see that you see the neck is a separate piece, and there's a ball joint at the end of that, and then on the head there's a dumbbell joint. The head comes off pretty easily, goes back on pretty easily. Looks a little weird though. His neck looks really wide, and his head makes his head look even smaller. That's what the figure looks like without his shoulder pads. The silhouette of the figure doesn't look as menacing, and that just makes it even more unfortunate that, you know, the shoulder pads had to be engineered the way that they were, because it's just really annoying dealing with them. I don't think the Magnaguard ever looked like this in the movies. They didn't really have that much screen time, but he did look like this in the animated series, I think, so that's why they allowed it to look like this. So that's really cool that they give you some different display options. Okay, now we'll get into some comparisons, and here's where we get into another pretty big negative thing, which is the height and the size of this character. So here they are next to General Grievous, and he is appropriately taller than them. Maybe a little bit too tall, but he is supposed to be tall. And this figure is undersized as well. He should be like really tall. Most of the time he was crouching, and he was still bigger, taller, and wider than most characters. So that gives you an idea. So that doesn't look too bad, but then when you bring in the battle droid is taller than the Magnaguard, and that's not okay. Like, if you're a big fan of Star Wars and you know like the proportions, you know what the characters look like, this is going to bother you. I think the issue here is not necessarily with the Magnaguard. I think it's more so with the battle droid. The battle droid is just oversized, and in general most of these figures are undersized. So like the General Grievous, it should be a lot bigger. Then when you get a character like Obi-Wan next to them, they're too close to the same height, and this also bothers me. It makes the Magnaguards look less menacing, less of a threat, especially General Grievous. You know, the General Grievous doesn't bother me that much because he is taller than most of the Jedi, but next to the Magnaguards are supposed to be like the big bodyguards of General Grievous, so I think they are undersized. Then next to some other characters from other figure lines. Here he is next to the Masterverse Vicron figure. Of course, the Masterverse figures are in 7-inch scale. Here is the Magnaguard next to Destro. This is a little bit closer, and you could even make like a Cobra Magnaguard custom if you want to do that. And here it is next to my custom Jean-Claude Van Damme. So they're a little bit shorter than most 6-inch figures, but honestly it doesn't look that bad. Here it is next to a Marvel Legends female figure, and this is just like a basic female figure, and it's going to be a little bit shorter than Magnaguard, not by much. And as far as head swaps are concerned, you're not going to be able to do much because most things are just not going to make sense. So for example, this makes no sense. It doesn't really look that cool. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe this could work like a Terminator custom or something. I don't know if you guys have any ideas for this. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this, let me know. And last height comparison, of course, you can't forget about the clone troopers. So here's the recent ARC Trooper Jesse next to the Magnaguard. And honestly, this doesn't look that bad. They don't look as powerful or as tough as they did in the various Star Wars media. So again, they're really undersized. And last thing I just thought of, you can put the cape on pretty much any figure you want. That looks kind of interesting. Kind of reminds me of you know, Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So there you go. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about this figure. Really good figures. Happy to have them in the collection. We definitely need more separatist characters. Let me know what you think about these figures. Let me know what you think about this review in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, let me know as well. Also follow me on Instagram at TrendKillToys. That's all I gotta say. I'll see you in the next one.